Okay, today is September the 19th, 2007. I'm in Moore, Oklahoma with Carolyn Coleman, who was in the House of Representatives for Oklahoma from 1990 through 2004, served 14 years. And this is part of the Oklahoma State University Library's oral history program entitled Women of the Oklahoma Legislature. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
Okay, did I say who I was?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
If I didn't, this is Tanya Finchum. We're going to start with Carolyn telling us a little bit about her childhood, where she was born, and a little bit about hometown.
Okay,
family.
well, pretty much I was born in Oklahoma City, southeast Oklahoma City, and I can remember back when I was about I can remember 2 years old, but I remember we lived on Hattie and Southeast 32nd, and we used to go across the sand. We had a red sandy road. We'd go across the road into this big field, and it was our crawdad patch. And my brothers had a place down in there where it was their camp, where they would play with their tire swing and all of that. And that became I-35 there at Southeast 15th down through there. So we lived there, and then I went to school at Crooked Oak Schools, and that was a pretty good school back when we were in school there, and then just things change, and it's a much smaller school now. But I went to school there, and went to college several different places, but I did not grow up well-to-do by any stretch, and when I was thinking about this, I thought about my dad, my dad worked really hard all of his life. He did really hard manual labor. So now in his later years, he's paying for it. He's not in real good physical health at all. And but I just had two really great parents. My mom pretty much stayed home and took care of us all of our growing up years, and so I have a lot of good memories of. We were basically poor, but I mean, we had a lot of good memories. We went doing our bike riding and went up to the stores and got our soda pops and all that type of thing. And so we had a lot of fun. And I have two brothers who are both older than I. And
You're the baby.
I'm the baby, and I'm the only girl. So in that birth order thing, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yes.
And both of my brothers live here in the city. In fact, one of my brothers just lives on the next street from me, and I think we all get along pretty well. And and when I was thinking about answering these questions, and I say we grew up basically poor, I always think about how relative that is, because there are so many people that are just so bad off, and then there's so many people that are so much better off. And I don't know if anybody really is in poverty in the United States anyway. Some people just have more than others, and so anyway, I didn't grow up with a whole lot of material things, but it did never seem to hurt me,
Well, when did you get interested in politics?
As far as really getting interested to work for candidates or run for office, it probably wasn't until I was about in my mid-30s, and we'd always voted. I registered. I remember, and I don't remember the year, but I know when they lowered it to 18, and I think I was 19 at the time. I'm not real sure, but I registered before I was 21, and so I think I voted for the wrong people a few times, but I always was interested. I remember when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Oh my gosh, I just boo-hooed over that. And then Bobby Kennedy. And I think I was teenagers when all that happened. But I remember all that. And I guess we just probably I think we were kind of part of that moral majority group of people. And Pat Robertson was running. And so we got in with some people and saw that what we thought some changes needed to be made, and so we got in. We went to our what do you call it? Your meetings in February. Your caucus meetings or precinct meetings. We started going to our precinct meetings and just met some people and met Helen Cole, met Tom Cole. I worked for Helen in her campaign. Met John Greenwood. I think at that time Tom Cole was running for office because Helen had retired, and so we got to know people, and it was at the time when this seat, it's been redrawn now about 3 or 4 times, but this seat had been drawn for Nancy Virtue Lewis back in 1980, I guess. And it was when it was first drawn, it was a heavily Democrat district. And I'm a conservative Republican, and Republicans all along had been running. Nobody could ever win. And then she retired because she married Steve Lewis. And then, my predecessor, and I can't remember his name, and he's a really nice guy. He has the pharmacy in Del City. And I hate that I can't remember his name. We just differed on political issues. And so some people said, well, why don't you run? It's time for a woman to run for that seat. And I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I'm honest, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I didn't agree with him on some of the things he had voted for. And I thought, well, shoot, I can do this. And so we ran, and I ran on a very meager campaign, and I won 63-36 or something like that.
Against a man.
Against an incumbent Democrat.
That's even harder.
Yeah, it was. And I think part of it, though, to be really honest, was that the demographics were changing. It was still a registered Democrat district, but the whole county had been changing. So I think I just got in at the right time.
What kind of things did you do campaigning?
I walked my little feet off. I mean, I back in those days, it's not like it is today. I mean, candidates spend way, way too much money on campaigns. It's ridiculous. All the consultants have gotten into the show. Mm-hmm. But we got our voting list, and we found the best voting Democrats and the best voting Republicans, and went out and just started knocking doors. And I'd already done that for John Greenwood and Tom Cole, so I knew what I was getting in there. And we walked every night and every Saturday, except when there was no OU game going on. We never walked when there was no OU game going, but we walked everywhere we could walk, and I was myself. I had about 4 issues, and I never said anything personal against John. That was his first name. I just cannot remember his last name. I never said anything personal against him. I just, I said, this is where I disagree. Mm-hmm. And, and some people said, I'm going to vote for you just because you're a woman. And I said, you need to really think about that, And, but I guess people were ready for a change, and.
Did you use the same strategy for each time you campaigned?
Pretty much.
Get a little easier each time?
It was a lot more fun in the beginning, and I never really, I could probably count on one hand the really nasty people that I ran into. Mm-hmm. But no, I just walked all the neighborhoods, and I remember visiting this one lady in a neighborhood, and when I went to her neighborhood, I think she was about the only house on the block. And before I was able to get back to her, she was pregnant at the time, and before I was able to get back to her, that little baby was about 2 years old by the time, or 3 years old by the time I was able to get back to her, because I walked, and when people wanted to talk to me, I talked to them, and I didn't just say, hi, I'm running for, and get out of there. I wanted to know what they were thinking, and I think they appreciated that. My husband was able to talk to more people than I was able to, because, he wasn't the candidate, and so I probably didn't. That's why it took me so long to get back around places, because I like to talk to people. And so I pretty much used the same strategy. I just went out and talked to people, told them what I thought, and told them, I'd always say, there are a few things that this is how I believe. I won't change. And if you can't deal with that, then you need to vote for my opponent. But everything else, you need to come to me and tell me what you're thinking because I don't know. And so that seemed to work pretty well most of the time.
So you campaigned 7 times, was each time against a man? Or any?
My first re-election was against a woman, and she was mean. I always tell candidates, just be aware, women can be very, very mean. I mean, they just can be. And that woman lied. I'm just going to be real honest. I would come home and I would read the Norman transcript. We have a newspaper in Norman that was horrible. That newspaper was horrible, and I ended up. I gave them. I put campaign pieces in the first year I ran. After that, I never spent another penny at that newspaper that I can think of. I may have that second election, but they're a very biased newspaper. So I said, when you want to be open and honest and visit with me, I'll come back. But until then, I don't care what you do. But anyway, I would come home and she would have an ad in that newspaper. And I could not believe somebody could be that mean-spirited, because she would attack me, and there may have been a grain of truth, but it was just twisted all over the place. And I'm thinking, because originally I thought on my first election, I thought, I'm not going to have any problems. Here I am a nobody, I don't have any skeletons in the closet. I'm this little woman with 2 kids and a husband. What can people say about me? So I found out real quickly that, and I've told candidates this, I said, if you don't have anything bad going on, believe me, they'll make it up. I mean, they just do. So it was a lady, and she just, really ugly stuff. I would come in a few times and fall across the bed and cry because it was just, so ugly. And but I beat her like 67% to something or other. And then I don't know who I ran against the next time. I had a man the next time.
Okay.
And I only got off one time without a race. I think that was I had a primary, but I didn't have a general. But every other time I had a race every 2 years. A couple of times I had primaries. And there's a whole lot of reasons I think I had races every time.
But you won.
I won, and I always won up in the 60s. So.
Do you remember your first day in office? What kind of thoughts you were having?
Well, I remember the inauguration. I was just overwhelmed, and not having been out there really before, and a lot of people that are elected, they'll come to me and say that this is the first time I've ever been at the Capitol, which is a shame, really, because it's our building and we should be out there and we should be talking to people and all of that. But I think I was pretty overwhelmed. I had no idea what was going on, and the advice was always to spend a little bit of time, getting to know the system, and not try to run too many bills, and just kind of learn that first year.
How old were your children at that time?
Let's see, Rachel, by the time I went in, I think Rachel was 14 and Sarah was 13. So they were old enough. And
you lived at home. You didn't have to have an
no,
apartment down there.
13 miles, And they had been in public school. They'd been in a little Christian school, and then they'd been homeschooled. So we had a very flexible routine pretty much. And so it worked out pretty well for us.
Did you have a different office space each time?
Well, okay, being in the minority party,
Okay.
All the Republicans, and of course, when I was elected, I think there were maybe only 31 Republicans. Which if we have a question on that, I can tell you about what it was like being a member of 31 Republicans out there. I went in, and I shared an office with Tim Pope, and it was no bigger. You could barely get to those big old desks.
Mm-hmm.
You could barely get 2 of those in the office. I had a desk and a bookshelf, and very crowded, very small reception area for our secretary. We shared an assistant, and let's see, I was with him for 2 years, and then I shared an office with another rep, and then as we were growing in number, they have a room that was the mail room up on the 5th floor. They came in and redid it, and I shared that with Joan Greenwood. And since she had been in longer than I was, I got stuck in the middle room, froze to death. And but it was a nicer office. And then I went across the hall and officed with Frank Lucas, and that had been a vault. And if you know who Frank Lucas is, he's about 6'5", 6'5", 6'6". So when he would go in, he'd always have to duck under to go in the office. But we were back in the vault, and since then they've redone that office also. But I was with him, and I think after that I finally got my own office. And I went down, and it was really the best office I had, except it was so small. It was on the 5th floor, right at the end of the stairs. We have stairs at the end of the hall, and you could just run down those stairs and go right into the chamber. And I loved that because I could be back there, and none of the lobbyists knew where I was. And so I could go back there, and they weren't, bothering me a lot of the time. But it was probably smaller than the space I shared. It was just, and then after that I got my own office and moved a couple more times, and had, I don't know how many assistants I ended up with. I think I had 1, 2, 3, 4, probably about 6 or 7 assistants in all those years. So it was interesting.
For 2 years. Well, describe a typical day in office.
Oh gosh. Well, I always tried to go up there. I mean, I got up every morning and went out there, because sometimes we didn't go into session until 1:30. Sometimes there weren't committee meetings. Committee meetings would start sometimes at 8 o'clock in the morning. And if you don't have a committee meeting, there's no point being up there. But I'd always try to get up there and go through my mail and talk to people. And I would spend time talking with the other reps to find out what was going on. Because I was a woman and I was a minority, and that's the only way I was going to find out anything. If I had to go ask, because otherwise I wasn't going to know anything. It was just really difficult. And so I would go talk to the guys that were, that I could not confide in, but I could go ask what was going on, and get a heads up on everything, on the legislation and stuff like that. And I tried to, when a constituent called, I would, talk to my constituents, and then an agency problem. I think I was always the type that would call the agency head and get to know them and talk to them. I spent time with staff, and if somebody came by, I'd always try to make time to visit with them, and then go sit in session. And sometimes it was really exciting, and sometimes it was really boring, and that pretty much be a day. Go through my mail, my constituents, find out what's going on, read my bills, go to committee meetings, and go to session.
And what time would you get home in the afternoon?
I actually got home around 5:30. No. On Thursdays I'd get home a little bit earlier, and then on Fridays we didn't have session, so I could do stuff I needed to do, and sometimes I'd go back out there on Fridays a little bit. But and what sometimes it was a little bit to my detriment, but because I lived so close, I came home. I had a husband and 2 children. I came home, but the people that came in from out of town that stayed in the motels and stuff, they spent a lot of time with the lobbyists, and it took me a little while, but I finally figured out, why does this guy know all of this stuff that's going on? Well, he's been out all night with the lobbyists. The lobbyists have been buying him dinner and telling him all this stuff. That's why they got to carry the bills, because they were spending so much time with the lobbyists. And I never did that. I came home, and I tried to find some issues that I was interested in, and just I did my thing. You know.
Do you remember your first bill that you presented on the floor?
I'm trying to remember my first bill. The first bill that I remember, I don't think it was my first bill, but the first bill that I remember doing got me in a lot of trouble with Norman schools because, and this may be a sore spot with all education, but you know, we have the gifted program for children. And it's been so long, I hardly even remember a lot of that stuff anymore. But that gifted program had some problems. I mean, I thought the gifted program was, you know, you have the gifted program and then you have special ed and all that. And the gifted program was supposed to be to really help those children excel, you know. And there should have been some boundaries, and there should have been, you know, some specifications that this is what the gifted program is for. And, you know, to be really honest, it was a funding mechanism. And so I did some work, and I talked to a lot of parents. I mean, not a lot of parents, I talked to a lot of people, but I talked to some parents that their children were in the gifted program, and I found out some of the things that were going on in the gifted program that did not help those children academically at all. And so, anyway, I put some funding restrictions and some definitions and that type of thing. And, oh, golly, Norman schools were furious with me because they were going to lose funding from it. And I thought, but this isn't right. You know, this isn't right what you're doing. You know, what are you doing with the money? Well, the money was not going to a gifted program at the time. And, of course, I can't remember all the details, but that's the first one I remember. And I ended up, who ended up carrying that bill? Somebody else ended up carrying it and passing it. A Democrat carried it because they finally realized that something needed to be done. And I stood up and answered the questions, and some of the people didn't even understand what I was trying to do. So they were trying to help me, and I'm going, no, I don't think that's what we want to do. And finally, I wish I could remember who finally passed that bill. Oh, well, I can't remember his name either, but he's retired. He's been ill. But anyway, he was head of either Education A and B, or he was head of Education A and B, and he carried the bill. And I remember when it was about to pass, I stood up and debated, and I said, you know, it's really none of us should get the credit for this, because there was a lady that had spent long hours. I mean, she had done so much research from the researchers and everybody that had done anything on gifted, and she brought me all this information. And the weekend before the bill passed, she had like a seizure, an aneurysm or something, and she died. And so I said, this is the lady who gets the credit for this bill. She's the one that did all the work for it, and she should get the credit. And they stood up and applauded, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what have I done? Because I was so naive. I didn't understand any of that stuff, you know. And so they applauded, and the lady's name was Donna, I think, and that's 14 years ago. And in fact, those ladies, the mothers that helped me when I was trying to get information from schools, the schools told us we can't provide you with that information. It's too complex. Did you know the ladies took a pad and pencil and came up with the figures within pennies? I finally got it from this one school district, and they were within pennies, and they had done it with paper and pencil, and the school district couldn't give it to me. They didn't have it. They didn't know how to get it, you know. And so I thought that was,
didn't want to.
No, of course they didn't want to, you know. And it was interesting. So that's the first bill I remember, you know, doing.
Well, what communities did you serve on?
I was on education, and back in those days they had it broken out into 3: Common Ed, Career Tech, not VOTech, and in higher ed. So I served on 2 of those, and human services, and education, human service, tourism, and they've changed the name so much. Health, public health.
Did you chair or co-chair any of them?
I was in the minority.
So, okay.
No. I finally, right before I left, I got to co-chair with the Democrat chairman in Human Services. And no.
So my question should be, what's your biggest obstacle, being in the wrong party or being female?
Both, I think. Now, I don't believe that, obviously, the Democrat women did not have that same problem. They were vice chairs or they were chairs, I think. Of course, I don't think there were that many. I know Carolyn Thompson was chair of the Education Committee because she pushed through House Bill 1017. But as more women came, they were always the chairman. So being a woman was a problem, but more than being a woman, it was the party. It was the party. It was run by Democrats. It was run by Democrats, and that's the way it was.
Well, did the women kind of work together, even though different parties?
We did to some extent, but the women on social issues, they were very liberal. We were all very conservative, and there were some issues there towards the end. Several of us got together against a senator, and it was kind of going around and around on some education issues. And we could talk, and we could kind of console each other and discuss what it was like being in your caucus. I mean, I think those problems were the same, pretty much. But when it came to putting your vote up on that board or doing what your leadership wanted you to do, they were going to go with the speaker. I mean, there was just they were going to go with the speaker. And that's the way it was, because they were in the majority party, and that's what you had to do. And so that was so we came together on some educational issues, a few, but not many issues, really, because there was a political line drawn down there, and I was conservative all the way, and I just had a real big problem with some of the money spending and stuff, and so.
Well, when it came to a social hour, if there was a social hour, could you tell much difference between men and women, or again, was it divided by party?
And I think and again, I didn't go to a whole lot of things. When I was first elected, I went to more than I did when I was finishing up. But there were some fun things, that we went to, and when it's kind of like a family. When I'll beat my brother up, but when you're out of there, you're all family again. You love each other. We'd beat each other up horribly in session when we were asking questions or debating or whatever. But the functions, it was like all of that was kind of pushed aside, because you had to have that civil relationship, because if it was anger and distrust and disagreement all of the time, you couldn't get anything done. And you had to learn that even though you might think one thing politically, that you're still a good person, and you can still talk about other things, and you can still have a relationship, So if when there were social events, everybody pretty much got along. There were some of those that drank heavily and didn't, and the guys, it was usually the guys who were drinking really heavily, and so I always kind of knew who to stay away from and all that type of thing. But no, it was time to finally relax and visit and get to know each other.
Did you make any lasting friendships with other women while you were there that you stay in touch with now?
Well, Kathleen Wilcoxon's probably my best friend. And Joan Greenwood and I were really good friends, but she's gone all the time now, so I haven't talked to her since probably last summer. And who else do I see? I took a liking to, oh good grief, what is wrong with my brain? She was a representative, and she went over to, she ran for Maxine, when Maxine retired. She's the black lady, Judy Eason McIntyre. Now I don't see her very often, but I really like Judy. We seem to get along pretty well. But I think Kathleen's probably the person that I have contact with pretty regularly.
Well, what would you consider your major accomplishments? A couple of your major accomplishments while you were there.
Well, it's difficult because, you know, when you're campaigning, people want to know that, and they want to know these bills you passed, and there's a few people that understand it's not all the bills you pass, because my gosh, we've got so many laws, it's ridiculous. It's just, you can't even hardly turn your head without there being a law, you know, to stop you from it. So I never did even file a whole lot of bills, but there were some people that understood that we didn't need any more bills, any more legislation, and then most of the bills I filed ended up being taken away from me, and so I have a you know, a few things. I guess my accomplishments would be that Kathleen and I worked on the reading legislation, because I'm not a teacher or anything, but I just, you know, my children, and I'm interested in that type of thing, and I go to conferences, you know, with their speakers and all that type of thing, and we had the OBE thing here in Oklahoma and all that, and my best friends, I guess, you know, Joan was a teacher, Kathleen's a teacher, my niece is a teacher, so I just am in that a lot. So anyway, I'd read some things on literacy, started getting figures and facts on reading, finding out that our children really aren't reading all that well, and I had a pretty good relationship with our Moore School District, talked with them about some things, and decided that there needed to be something done so that when children start to school, they are taught how to read. And there's a way to do that, you know. And a lot of people disagreed with me because they thought I was trying to do phonics as the end all and be all, which I do believe that phonics are probably about the best way to read, because we read by sound. We don't read by sight. And so anyway, we worked for, I don't know, several years on that. And I had files of information, and a lot of times you don't write your own legislation out there. The staff writes it. And I'll tell you what, sometimes those people have no idea what their legislation even says. They just don't. They can tell you they do, but they don't, because the staff writes it. And but I would, and that's not true of everybody, of course, but I had all this information, and I would have to write my legislation, because the staff, we had some really good staff people, but they didn't know any of that. So I'd have to write my own legislation, and I would send it off to other states and have different people look at it and come back. And basically what I wanted and that was about the time I think Kathleen came, and what I wanted was for teachers to be trained in a, in a well-rounded way, and I don't even know what it's called now, but that they would have a full arsenal on how to teach children to read. You know, that they would be able to work with the children and know what those children's needs were, and how to work with those children to do diagnostic, and I hate to use the word test, but do little diagnostics on them. I mean, so that they would know what those children need. And we worked on that. I fought Barbara Staggs week after week after week on that. I mean, we fought each other like crazy. We could go out and be friends, but we fought each other like crazy on this, because she didn't agree with me at all, and a lot of people didn't understand what phonics were, and so worked on that. It would be killed in committee. I mean, every time it would be killed, and I would try to put some amendments on the floor. They would be killed every time, And do you know, one day in session, it was in April, and what you can do at the Capitol is you can, I don't know if you can now, but you could file shell bills, and that's what it was. It was a shell bill, it had no language in it. You could come in later on and put language in it. So all of my bills have been killed. And lo and behold, and I love the lady dearly, but Betty Boyd stands up and she has her bill. And it's my bill. It's my language. I mean, they just took my language, put it in her shell bill, and it became the Reading Sufficiency Act. And I don't know who, I think Penny Williams carried it in the Senate. And I didn't put any funding in it because as I talked with the schools, isn't that what you're supposed to be doing? I mean, in the first, second, and third grade, and even kindergarten, if you're not working with those children, get them to become proficient readers by the third grade, they're in bad trouble. So what else are you doing if you're not teaching these children to read in the first, second, and third grade? What are you doing? And I don't know what they were doing. They were doing all this stuff that all the laws make them do, I guess, you know. And so I didn't think they needed funding. I thought they just needed to be doing this. And so Betty put funding in it, and it's just been mutilated something horribly. I still don't think our children are reading. We can't, Kathleen and I couldn't get, have not been able to get any legitimate information from Teachers Prep or anything. And it's been years. I've been out 4 years, so it's been 8 years, you know, and still can't read. But anyway, I thought, okay, my name's not on the bill. Everybody knows that it's me. I even talked with Sandy Garrett. We just don't do that anymore, you know. We just don't do that anymore. So lo and behold, I read in the newspaper where Sandy Garrett and Betty Boyd are in Tulsa. And Sandy Garrett's been a phonics proponent all her life. Well, no, she hasn't. And Betty Boyd gets all the credit for the legislation. And that crushed me, you know. That just crushed me because I had worked so hard, but that's the way it is out there, you know. And you either get a tough skin and you deal with it and understand that it's not about your name being on the bills. Now, if you're a politician and you want to go someplace, yeah, your name better be on some bills, you know. But that's not what I was about, and so we got it passed, and we fine-tuned it over a little bit, you know, over the years, and but that was one of my biggest accomplishments, even though I don't know that it's even done that much good, you know. And I tried to get remedial ed taken out of the universities, and that one didn't go over too well, and because Joe Castiglione told me I was going to destroy the athletics department. And I said, well, now that's a horrible way to feel about your athletes, and because that's not what our universities are for. And I think David Bourne's done a lot of work on that. But the junior colleges, that's what the junior colleges are for. If they're not getting what they need in high school, which is a shame, that's what the junior colleges were for.
Well, OSU's done the NOC, the Northern Oklahoma College Gateway program, which is similar to, but it's to do the remedial.
But it's all about money.
Yes.
And it's all about money. And so I was on that mic, some radio talk show, and I had said that if somebody told me, if they had that attitude about me, that I was that stupid, I would be so upset. That's a horrible attitude to have about their football players, you know, and everything. So I can remember standing in the chamber, standing there for 3 hours at a time fielding questions. I mean, and I just laughed it off, but boy, towards the end, I was getting really tired of it because it was 3 hours at a time fielding questions about that. And it was because the universities had come and said, do not allow that because of the money. And so that didn't never get very far. But you know, one accomplishment, I filed a bill with Helen Cole, and it was to stop the smoking in our schools. Because I thought if we're spending all this money and all this time telling people how bad smoking is for people, how health-wise it is, then teachers should not be allowed to go into the lounges and smoke, because I know those kids see the children see the teachers smoking, and I thought this is not a good role model for these children. On the one hand, to be told how bad smoking is, and then to watch their teachers go in the lounges and smoke. So we worked that around and finally got that passed. But I had at the VOTEX, or career techs, that they had to be so far away from the school. They could not smoke on their campuses because you have high school kids coming in there. Well, that hit the fan too, and the lady who was over the career tech came up, and this was a no-no what she did. When you want to change a bill, you go to the bill's author, and you ask the bill's author to make some amendments to that legislation. Well, she went to Terry McIntyre, who was a Democrat, and he was a rural legislator, and she went to him and asked him to change that to exempt the VOTEX from the bill. And then the gentleman, Frank Coulter from Moore Norman, came and talked to me about it, and he said, well, she says she came and talked to you and you were all right with that. I said, no, nobody's ever talked to me about this, and I wouldn't okay it if they had. And so, they passed it with I may have been the only negative vote, I don't know, but I stood up and said, this is what happened, and I don't appreciate it, But since then, what has happened? You can't smoke anywhere. And I don't agree with banning it in private businesses, but that's what I was after, is to keep it out of our schools, off of our school grounds. And they just had cows about it. They just had, they just couldn't. This is horrible, but they've done it anyway now. So
a little bit ahead of your time.
Yeah, I was ahead of my time, I guess. So.
Well, what have you done since leaving office?
Oh, well, I went back to OSU Tech for a while, just to take some fun classes. And I worked part-time, just doing some fun stuff. I've got 2 grandbabies now, and unfortunately the grandbabies are in Kansas City, which is not right. That this should have somebody file a bill, because it's not right. Those grandbabies should be here with me. And so I go up there whenever I can. I try to, like, once a month, but that gets expensive. But I had 2 grandbabies in Kansas City, and have a daughter in Northwest Oklahoma City. And my mom and dad are, they're really not that old. They're 80 and 82, but my dad's in really bad health. Like I said, he worked really hard when he was younger, just hard physical labor. This is kind of a side note. See, I told you I ramble.
Okay.
But when he was younger, it was a matter-of-fact thing that he was telling me one time, and to know my dad, I would believe it. He was tested because he has only one eye, and he was supposedly supposed to go to school to learn a trade, but he was tested, and one day he was just telling me, he said, they told me my IQ was 150. So he's very bright. Mm-hmm. And I can remember he didn't go past the 6th or 8th grade, but that man can figure anything out in the world. I mean, he can't do it so much now, but because he's had a stroke, but he could figure anything. But because it's one good thing about some of the laws that we have, when he was younger and we were growing up, there weren't the laws to protect him, and he always was fired because he was a health risk. And I can't even hardly talk about it because it just breaks my heart, And so he did extremely hard physical manual labor all of his life. And part of that was because he's a man, But now that he's older, his back's just giving out on him. So I spend a lot of time over there, and he's had a stroke. So, just spend a lot of time doing stuff with him as much as I can. So, and my husband wants me home, and so this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, that's good too. I want to back up a minute. I forgot to ask. Were you in the building when the bomb, the Murrah building bomb?
I was over at the Labor Department, and we were having a meeting over there, and we were sitting there, and we heard the hand the doorknobs jiggled. And so we were making jokes about, oh, maybe somebody's trying to break in here on us. And then after a few minutes after that, somebody came and told us what had happened. And we all went out to look out the window, and smoke was coming up. And that was a horrible experience because I just wanted to get home, I just wanted to get home to my kids. And Kevin Cox, his little boy, was in the daycare down by there. And he came in, he was just weeping and saying what he was seeing down there. And then I don't know if there was a phone call or what, but because, that's the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
They came over the speakers and saying, look for any kind of strange sacks, boxes, anywhere in the Capitol. And we all evacuated and came home. And it was just, and after I left the Labor Department, I went back to the Capitol, and that was where Kevin was saying what he had seen and everything. And it was a horrible feeling, It was just a really horrible feeling. And so then we came home. And then a few days after that, they arranged it to where the legislators could go down and see all the mess. And it was quite a mess. It was just horrible, So.
I know I should be asking more people that. I just thought of it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and then we were up at New York City about a week before the 9/11, and we were all down in there in the Twin Towers and all of that. And so, it's just, we brought back and had our pictures developed and have our Twin Towers up there, and they're no more. So it's a strange feeling.
But my last question, unless we come up with something else, well, I should say, is there anything I should ask you before I ask my last question?
Oh,
anything else
let's
you want
see.
to cover? Did you have to have a new wardrobe to do this job?
I finally did. I started out, with skirts and blazers and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think about the ladies, and they kind of dress all over the board, sometimes. There are a few ladies that, the suits. They never wear anything but suits. And some are a little bit more casual. And I won't tell you her name, but there was a representative that was elected, and she came up there, and she would wear a blazer, but she would wear these horribly, horribly derogatory T-shirts. They were derogatory against men. They were horrible. And she would come over to us and give us these cartoons that she had taken off. She copied off somewhere, and they were horrible. And she would give those to us and say, "These are just for us girls." And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh! And I'm so dumb. I never shared it with any of the guys. And she learned, maybe after the first session or after the first year or the first legislative session, she learned, because after that she started dressing very professionally. But no, there are a few of the people that noticed that, but it was very, very inappropriate, totally inappropriate what she did. And so she, she finally started dressing very professionally. And but along the line, I finally realized I need some suits here. And
well, I've been told the chamber is always cold.
Oh, it's freezing.
So,
it's freezing, and I would gripe like crazy about those fans and everything, trying to get them to turn the fans down, turn the heat up. In fact, I can even remember, I don't know why I keep remembering Kevin Cox, but he went out to his car one time and got a blanket. It was horribly cold, and I guess it's to keep you awake some of the time, And but I guess one thing before, because I answered this on one of the questions about being a woman out there, just for posterity, I guess. It was difficult being a woman it's difficult being a Republican woman in the minority. But one thing people need to understand is, and there were some guys out there that were horrible male chauvinists. I knew not to ever get near them. And there's one guy I should have filed a sexual harassment suit against once because of his off-color teasing, and I knew who I could tease with and who I couldn't. You know, I knew who I could come up and pat on the back, and who I couldn't. You know, but women are no different. I mean, there were, and again, I'm not going to say names, but there was one legislator. She was young, and to get what she wanted, she would go to the back of the chamber and hop up on the desk because she wore these real cute little short skirts, and she knew what she was doing. I mean, she used her sexuality. You know, the men go about it a different way, but the women use their sexuality. You know, and she would. I saw this particular rep several times. Just, I mean, embraced with men. I called it bear hugged. You know, and she knew what she was doing, and I thought that's just, you don't need to do that. You know. And then this other rep, she would file all these bills and would kill them. And so then she'd come over to the guys, start rubbing her hands all over them and saying, if you'll just vote, you know, if you're just giving me let me bring it back up and I'll take it back to committee. And she would just rub all over them. And of course they did it. And she never did come up with decent bills, I didn't think. But I would go to them after I'd sat there and I would just watch this going on. And I'd go over and I'd say, you are so pathetic. You are so pathetic that you let her come over here and do this. And so she managed to get, you know, her stuff through. But most of the other women, I don't think, really did that. You know, we just, I mean, there's always a little bit of that feminine thing because we're just women and we deal with things differently. Mm-hmm. But I remember those two, and I just thought it was disgusting. And then there were always rumors and stuff like that. But it was difficult being a woman out there because you weren't in the in group. Like I said at the beginning, I had to go and search out information because they weren't going to give it to me voluntarily. You know, and I think that's probably true of most of the women would say that to a degree. We had to fight. I mean, we had to really fight. But for all those guys that were just horrible, there were some really good guys that, I mean, I just thought the world of them. And they understood that we were all equal out there, you know. And but anyway, that was just something that I since this is about women, that I think people need to know.
Well, in your 14 years there, was there much difference from your first couple of years to when you finished in that type of behavior?
Well, just like I said, you know, those two, and then of course now in our caucus, they're in the Republican caucus. There are I don't know how many women there are, but because there were at one point there were two of us, mm-hmm. and then there were three, and then it went on up. So I think the women have more of a voice now. So that makes it different. You know, that there's a difference there. And you know, and the thing about being a woman, people, I never wanted, when I'd go out and campaign, I never wanted people to elect me because I was a woman. You know, I'd always go tell people, you need to elect men and women who are just, who are honest, you know, who are truthful, who will tell you what's going on and won't, you know, lie to you and patronize you. You just need good, honest people. You can disagree, but that's what you need. You don't need so many women and you don't need so many men. I just think you need good
representatives.
Yeah. You know.
My last question is, when history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
Oh.
Tough question, perhaps.
Well, obviously, since I don't have any big aspirations to be the president, I would just like people to remember that I was honest with them, mm-hmm. that I didn't feed them a line, that I was compassionate to them, and that what you see is what you get. you know, I never, I learned over the years to be a little discreet. That's not being dishonest. Sometimes you just have to be discreet because it doesn't do any good to, you know, to say certain things, you know, but I just hope that people would know that Carolyn Coleman was honest with them, and that I was that I treated them justly, and I didn't put on airs with them, and I wasn't a people pleaser, you know, that I respected everybody no matter where they came from. I think if people would say that about me, I'd be happy.
Well, just from listening to you today, I would think they would.
Well, you never know.
You were there to serve the people, and you did it well.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I was walking in this neighborhood one time, and this lady, truthfully, I think she had some severe emotional problems. I think that she had gone through some bad things, because she asked me the abortion question, and I told her, you know, where I was coming from, and she was really, and I felt bad for her because she was just angry, hurt, and just, it was just a horrible situation. I tried to walk away because there's no point getting in arguments. I tried to walk away. Her husband came out. She even jumped all over him. So anyway, I'm walking. I got out of there and I'm walking down. So I'm coming around the street and I'm coming back down. And for whatever reason, I couldn't see real clearly. And there's this lady walking towards me. And in my imaginations, I thought, oh my God, this lady's got a gun and she's going to come and shoot me. I mean, it was that wild. And of course, as I got up closer, it was just some woman walking down the street going to a neighbor's house, you know. But all these, man, this was just really going through my head that, oh my gosh, because she needed some counseling. She was really in bad shape. But I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get shot. So that was fun. But anyway, that's pretty much what I went through. So
It must have been interesting to do it, and for doing it 10, 12, 14 years.
It was really interesting, and people were nice, you know. Even the ones that I rescued a cat one time from a dog, and it turned out that she was a librarian at Norman Schools, and this poor little cat, this dog had it, and I'm trying to campaign, and I get all these little neighbor kids, and we run up there and get the dog off the cat, and then the lady comes in, and she's just hysterical over her cat. And so she got the cat, and I saw her months later. We didn't agree politically, of course, but you know, we talked, and her cat was fine. But it was just horrible. It was a horrible experience. But we saved that little cat, and so there were a lot of neat experiences. You know, I'd be out there walking at 113 degrees, and people would offer me lemonade, water, Cokes, and people are just genuinely nice. I mean, people are nice. They're good people. You just once in a while find these people that are just, you know, off the edge. But and most of the people at the legislature, whether you agree with them or not, most of those people are trying to better the state. You know, and so I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. You know, because I don't think I'd have the outlook or the perspective on stuff that I have. You know, right now, if I hadn't gone through that. As rough as it was sometimes, and it was really rough sometimes. But you know, you visit with people, and you meet people. Constituents come in, and all kinds of people come in with their needs and things you never even thought of. You know, and so it broadens your world quite a bit. So,
well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.